but let's try to get to a few points at least in the short remaining time, and please be brief while answering the question, because we really got a little bit very far behind schedule now. Just to raise the question, I mean, we said it doesn't make sense to have borders reintroduced in the internet. That was common sense here. I guess we don't have to talk about that anymore. But would it make sense to create a virtual free trade zone for data in Europe? Would that be something we should go for? Is that together? Would that fit together with Schengen for data or not? Who wants to go? Suppose.
I would not know what that means.
Virtual free trade zone.
What it means, virtual free trade zone. No taxes, or what?
Well, an area where free flow.
I think we face one problem. We are talking here on a very positive high level, and when you go back to the administrations like Portugal, like myself, like Germany, what have you, we are not using it. Why are we not using it for real things? In many ways, for things that matter, because we need to identify some simple services which we are confident to get in. Well, Mario said it. I grew up this way, and that's the basic problem. I think when we start like with a communication system, which means mail, calendar, etc., we formulate the needs, and then we see that works in the cloud. This is a step forward. Then we can go things like, which is happening on one spot, like in the Commission, like to archiving data. We trust that they stay there. That was mentioned by our Norwegian friend. And then we can go much more complicated areas, like word and document processing. If you look into these areas, they are ways more complicated, because it's not only the sharing, it's also the lock-in factor, which has been mentioned, and how do we get... Lock-in factor to me means, how do we get to the next level of abstraction? Cloud is today. In 10 years, we will not talk cloud, we will talk the next level of abstraction. We must be ready to get there. And this is the avenue, the political and the strategic avenue to get to all these steps. That's the big challenge.
Let's take one step back and ask, do we have the cloud for the cloud in Europe? Do we have enough strong players to build a European cloud? Because the main players at the moment are overseas, of course.
Just one short. I think we need strong players in the security area, which we have. Then it doesn't so much matter which cloud we hook onto.
I just would like to give another perspective, because we always say that cloud is good, for example, for SMEs because of reduction of price. But I want to put the other side of the coin. In fact, in Europe, through procurement, through intelligent procurement, we could actually trigger the emergence of SMEs that will provide the landscape of the provision of cloud in Europe much more vivid than in other parts of the world. So you don't need to live necessarily out of big integrators to provide the cloud solutions.
Well, maybe from the industry, from your point?
Well, I think at the moment, of course, if you look at the big companies in the internet space, it's US and China, right, which are much bigger, right? So they've done a lot better. I mean, clearly we are behind in Europe. That's what my whole speech was in the beginning about. Let's get going.
I think that in the cloud space, we are going to face a very similar to situation with what we had with the battle on operating systems in back-end several years ago. And the internet today would not be the same if something like Linux or Apache hasn't arisen. So, but now the point is, the next battle is going to be on this operating system that the cloud, together with enablers, will provide, on which all the application developers will create their application. Should Europe just stand, without doing nothing, so that incumbent players position their operating system, or should we, or expect that a miracle happens and something like Linux, but in the cloud space happens, or should do something proactively? I think the answer is we should.
Another question would be, we already mentioned how to bring in the SMEs. How do we really connect to the SMEs, and how could they foster the Cloud for Europe strategy? Who wants to go for that one? It's a little bit tricky, huh?
I just can take the example of the G-Cloud program in UK, where the concrete results that they have is that today they have cheaper solutions being provided for the G-Cloud, and the amount of SMEs that are involved in the provision of the cloud is, much bigger. While in the past the provision of the service were being done basically by big integrators. I mean, you have now a lot of SMEs that are providing solutions more intelligent, more user-friendly, and cheaper.
I think the answer to that is very simple. We need a meeting point. We don't have a meeting point on the internet today in Europe. A place, a URL, where these entrepreneurs will connect to and find out that other entrepreneurs are working on data that, for instance, public administration is delivered there, and where companies also can approach that space and discover those entrepreneurs. Why don't we set up that space? I think that is one opportunity, one thing we could do. This is indeed what we are trying to somehow do with FileUp, but it doesn't matter who does this, but we should do this.
One last question from my side before we're going into the audience. Has the public sector really special requirements that prevent it from buying the normal technology for the cloud? So do we really need a kind of a special cloud for the public sector?
I don't think, I think we need to collect the needs across Europe in a way that we have the same needs in many or in several member states. And then the cloud will offer these solutions. They will either themselves or on top of existing clouds offer these solutions. And it's basically the same with the SMEs you addressed. They are scared to lose their IPR there. And we have to enable them beforehand. And you can map that nearly one-to-one.
Okay, I've seen we had a couple of questions or comments. Yes?
Yes, it's Jonathan Sage from IBM. And it's a question really to Christian. I really enjoyed your intervention. I just have one question, and it's the second time we've heard the notion of European cloud. We heard it in the previous session. I think it was the Airbus of clouds. Now, my question is, what specifically is meant by that? I mean, we have no shortage of infrastructure. Is this an infrastructure as a service cloud? If so, is it subsidized, special conditions, or is it cut off from the rest of the world? Is it managed? Is it manageable outside Europe? So what's the specific benefit and objective of this notion of European cloud?
Yeah, I think very good question. Actually, first of all, I don't think it's a disconnect from the world, to make that clear. I don't think that's a way to go. And I mean, the logic was that we would have some common rules and ways of doing things, because at the moment, Europe is very much driving towards, or some countries are driving towards doing it on their own now because of the fear. And it's a normal reaction when everything gets uncertain that you cramp in. When we should actually open up within the Europe as well. That the countries would not, kind of going back to the headline of this topic for this panel, right? We should not have country-level databases and everybody requires, because then you will have definitely totally uncompetitive European industry. You will basically make certain that we can't fly. And the SMEs or any company that wants to build something is not going to have a shot at it even in Europe. So I think it's about not starting to get into that mode in Europe. So we try to get some common rules, which is not easy because it then have very different legislations in the member states. So then it was talked about let's move on with those who are ready to go now. That was the Schengen idea. I think that for those who can move now, that we have at least some common basis for definition of rules, going a bit back to what the GSM was in its time, that you have some basic rules. Could be an even, who knows, open source European software.
Just very briefly, I mean, I fully agree. I mean, but the question is, that question always sounds to me like we were completely open to the world and somebody tries to restrict to the European level. Now let me put it right in perspective. We are by default at country level, if not at region level. The effort when we're talking about an European is to broaden it and overcome the limitations of the borders, not to say that to become a fortress Europe. Then if we are able to associate to this effort some peculiarities that have to do with our notion, our values, our notion of privacy or security or whatever, be it, but there is, I think, no intention in any of, at least the ones that are working with us, into establishing a fortress Europe. On the contrary, is to go from a very fragmented situation that we have today to a less fragmented, and therefore Europe as such give us a good common ground. But it could be also global if other partners would join us.
Well, maybe this whole comparison with the IT Airbus doesn't really fit, because the Airbus is really something which was developed for about 20 years or so, and we are now in services that are running or should be up and running in a few months or a few days. So the whole idea, I guess it's at least a little bit complicated.
That will not work. How can you imagine that, assume China and US is running. Now you are starting and you assume that within a few months you are further than these. You have to, either you have some very good idea or very sellable setup, which might in the European situation be data protection, security, etc., etc. Or you take your time. I liked a lot this pooling idea and stock exchange idea, where we pool all the European resources and then have it there where you can have a larger enterprise. That might be one idea, or we have better ones. But we should not think that if we go the same avenue with the same muscles as our competitors, that we run and overtake them.
But I think that the metaphor still is valid in the sense of let's get, and I'm going to please my friend Christian on my side, let's get united, and there's nothing to do with product. Let's get united to build something that is different. That's exactly the concept of Airbus. I mean, it is manufactured in different places of Europe, fights in a global context, and provides some specificities. And like you say, is it privacy? Is it just to be more eco-friendly? I mean, whatever. I mean, if we find that there is a business opportunity and we can come together, we'll have the scale that is necessary to build service that can be sold internationally.
Well, thank you. We have seen we don't want to recreate any new specific borders in the internet. I guess that's what we take specifically from this point here and from this podium here, and that we all should go united. So we definitely will try out your service. Maybe one last point from you. How much is the service actually? Is it free?
Yeah, it's okay. Now I'm getting this is
freedom.
Which one? Yeah. No, I am not gonna get into pricing discussion here. It will be the most competitive offer on the market, I hope.
Most competitive offer.
Yeah.
So let's try to build the most.
Shut up now. Thanks.
Most competitive offers. Okay, I thank you all. Thank you very much for your points here. Thank you for your awareness.